was a fantastic car. Incredible experience. It was Willi Kauhsen car. Willi Kauhsen took me to Nürburgring, and then he drove his Mercedes around before I drove the Canon car. And he said, Emerson, this corner flat with the 917. Are you sure? I said, don't worry, come flat, because the car had so much downforce, a big wing. And he was right, but race morning was raining. I opened the window, 1,200 horsepower on the wet. I cannot touch the throttle. And I'm warming up in the short circuit, the little one, and the engine started misfiring. Was not going 12 cylinder. And I stopped everybody from Porsche. Willi was just watching, the engineers, the mechanics on Porsche. Emerson, it's misfired the engine. I said, leave it like this. 10 cylinders enough, don't put 12.
Hier ist Alte Schule, die goldene Ära des Automobils.
Mein Name ist Carsten Arndt, herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Ausgabe und heute gibt es eine Premiere bei mir, der erste Formel-1-Weltmeister, der in der Alten Schule zu hören ist. Und dann gleich einer mitten aus einer für mich ganz besonders glorreichen Zeit. Emerson Fittipaldi, der 1972 und 1974 am Ende der Saison ganz oben auf dem Treppchen der Königsklasse stand, der verkörpert für mich wie wenige andere diese wilde Dekade. Denkt nur mal an die Fotos aus dieser Zeit. Emmo mit seinen breiten Koteletten, der wilden Frisur, dem listigen Lächeln auf den Lippen, hinter seiner Sonnenbrille, dem Style, dann noch die Musik der 70s und diese wilden und ungezügelten Autos. Und er mittendrin, und was ich wirklich festgestellt habe, für ihn war es nicht nur ein Job, um Mädels kennenzulernen, vielleicht auch, aber der Mann lebt den Motorsport, hat tiefe Kenntnis von Fahrern aller möglichen Klassen, Strecken, der Historie, interessiert sich für jedes technische Detail, auch heute noch, und vor allem hat er eins, fast kindlich leuchtende Augen, die man sieht, wenn man ihm gegenüber sitzt und er von seinem Sport erzählt. Und das ist wirklich immer ganz besonders faszinierend, wenn da nie so eine gewisse Abgeklärtheit einsetzt. Übrigens habe ich Emmo nach meinem vorabendlichen Interview mit Walter Wolf getroffen, dem er ja einst den Rennstall abgekauft hat. Es gab da also eine gewisse Verbindung zwischen beiden und falls ihr es noch nicht gehört habt, empfehle ich euch auch nochmal mein Interview mit Walter Wolf. Habt ihr euch auch zum Jahresbeginn so viel vorgenommen, um mal etwas für eure Gesundheit zu tun? Und jetzt ganz ehrlich, was ist davon übrig geblieben? Bei mir leider viel zu wenig, aber eine Sache ist schon seit längerer Zeit zu meiner morgendlichen Routine geworden und die ist auch noch geblieben und das betrifft die Ernährung. Auch immer so ein Thema, wenn die Verlockungen groß genug sind. Ich nutze da AG1 von Athletic Greens und dank dieser täglichen Gesundheitsdosis fühle ich mich fitter und die Nägel sind auch stabiler geworden. Das sind zwei Dinge, die mir mal so aufgefallen sind und das liegt an den 75 Vitaminen, Mineralstoffen, Bakterienkulturen und anderen wichtigen Inhaltsstoffen, die aus echten Lebensmitteln gewonnen werden und die stecken da alle drin. Und das funktioniert folgendermaßen, man macht sich einfach morgens einen Drink, der an unsere aller Lieblingsfarbe British Racing Green erinnert und der sogar gut schmeckt und man weiß einfach, dass man jetzt schon mal zahlreiche empfohlene Tagesdosen von vielen, vielen Nährstoffen und Vitaminen zu sich genommen hat und der Tag ernährungstechnisch gar nicht mehr so schlimm werden kann, auch wenn es danach an der Rennstrecke wieder nur Currywurst gibt. AG1 zahlt dabei auf alles ein, Immunsystem, die Darmgesundheit, Energiehaushalt, gesundes Altern und außer um diesen täglichen Drink müsst ihr euch um nichts kümmern, denn AG1 kommt auch noch im praktischen Abo direkt zu euch nach Hause. Und natürlich bestimmt ihr dabei den Lieferrhythmus selbst und könnt jederzeit kündigen. Und was ich ganz außergewöhnlich finde, es gibt inzwischen sogar gleich 90 Tage Geld-Zurück-Garantie. Habt ihr das bei sowas schon mal gehört? Ich nicht. Und bei mir bekommt ihr noch ein ganz besonderes Paket. Unter dem Link athleticgreens.com/Alte Schule kommt noch ein kostenloser Jahresvorrat Vitamin D3 und K2 und 5 praktische Travel Packs dazu. Probiert's auf jeden Fall aus. Wie gesagt, mit der Geld-Zurück-Garantie geht ihr sicher kein Risiko ein. Alle Infos zu Athletic Greens und AG1 auch nochmal bei mir in den Shownotes. Und hier ist er jetzt für euch, der zweifache Formel-1-Weltmeister aus Brasilien. Hier ist Emerson Fittipaldi.
It was a passion for my family, for my father, for my mother, to be always in racing weekend. It was like club in São Paulo with amateurs and some professional drivers. My father was amateur. He works on a radio station. Mm-hmm. And he was broadcasting, commentating racing circuits all over Brazil. And it's interesting, his first race he watched was 1938. He was only 18 years old and was Rio de Janeiro Grand Prix in Rio de Janeiro. Mm-hmm. And by coincidence, Hans Stuck's father, Hans Stuck was here yesterday.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
you met him or not?
No, I just missed him by half an hour.
And I was talking to Hans Stuck because his father was racing the Alte Union in Rio de Janeiro. Beautiful track by the ocean, up in the hill. And it was first time my father watched a race. And we are from São Paulo. He had to get the train at night. Then he had no money to buy tickets. He went up on the tree and he watched and he said, "This is fantastic." He never saw a race car. And Hans Stuck's father was racing.
So crazy, isn't it?
And then he was on a bachelor party, the end of the year party for the school. And the presenter who talks to present the students, the teacher, got sick. And then my father had a very good voice. And they said, "Anybody here wants to be volunteer to do the presentation because our guy got sick?" My father raised the arm and he had a very good voice, and that's how he started in radio. And then the radio station hired him to do football because Brazil is huge in football.
Yes.
But my father didn't like it. And as he always liked racing, he told the station, "Why we don't do racing?" He was the first one to do broadcast in Brazil for race. And then there was history, And when I was 5 years old, he took me to Interlagos, I remember. I saw a race car going by. I said, "Oh, that's what I want to do. One day, my dream to be a race driver."
And your mother drove an old Mercedes-Benz diesel.
24 hours. Race with another lady. And they finished ahead of my father. That was always a joke in the family.
I think so. And then you watched another idol, John Surtees, on a motorbike.
I watched John racing an opening of a new park in São Paulo.
Yeah.
It was the 400 years of the city of São Paulo. And I watched John. I told John, when the race was there, I was 8 years old. And John would race. He won a Norton Manx, English bike, Norton. And the second guy was Gilera, I remember.
Yeah, you remember everything.
Because I love racing,
Yeah.
It was crazy.
So what was your first race when you were sitting in the car? It was a Renault, I think.
My first car race was Renault in Rio de Janeiro. And then end of the street, I ran out of brakes. I went upside down, destroyed the car. And then my second race was again Renault, but this time I had the brakes and I won the race.
But I think it was in your first race, it was the only time that you went upside down in a car.
All my life, yes.
So better not to do it in a Formula One. So and then you thought about racing in Formula cars. Because you always wanted to become a Formula One driver or a Formula driver? Or?
Yes, I always had the dream to be a Formula One driver, yes. At that time in Brazil, Fangio was very big, being Latin America, Argentina. Being 5 times, he was a friend of my father. 1954 and 5, my father broadcast the Argentinian Grand Prix when Fangio won with the Mercedes. He and Stilling-Moss. But I didn't come. I was only 8 years old. I didn't come to Argentina. And then the second idol we had was Hermanos Rodrigues, Pedro and Ricardo Rodrigues. After Fangio, the other from Latin America, the best drivers. And we had a very good driver in Brazil called Chico Landi, who raced Formula One, was first Brazilian driver to race in Europe. And he made the first win for Ferrari in Bari Grand Prix, on the streets of Bari. And my father broadcast in 1948 to Brazil the race. And my father was together with Chico Landi, the Brazilian driver. He was a very good driver. He raced against Hans Stuck in Rio de Janeiro, and my father was there. And then my father was a very good friend, and was they called Monoposto Ferrari. It was not the Formula 2, it was not the Formula 1. And this Brazilian driver, for the first win for Ferrari won, my father was there. And Enzo Ferrari had the emblem of Ferrari on his pocket. After he won, he put on the nose of the car. It was 1948 bar. It's the history of Ferrari.
It was the beginning.
First win, nobody knows, as a Brazilian driver. And he was my idol too. Fangio and Chico Landi. And they're already Grand Prix drivers. And I was always, one day I hope to be like Fangio, like Chico Landi.
Your father witnessed history.
Yes. It was very interesting.
Crazy.
And then in 1951, my father went to the president of Brazil, Getúlio Vargas at that time, asked Brazil to buy a Ferrari 4.5 Grand Prix car for Chico Landi. And they bought.
Really?
It was painted yellow. The Brazilian government bought.
Okay.
And then he raced like 2 years in Europe, but not all the championship. He would come and race like 3-4 Grand Prix. But my father asked the president of Brazil to buy a Ferrari. They called the Elephant. It was a big Ferrari, 4.5 liter engine. Mm-hmm. If you look in the history of Ferrari, 1951 or 52. I was too small, don't remember. Yeah. But I had pictures. My father, the president of Brazil, and Chico Landi delivered in Rio de Janeiro, the Ferrari. Rio de Janeiro was the capital. There's a lot of history people don't know.
Never heard about that. How did you finance your racing ambitions? Did your father...
No, my father was mid-class. I had a good school, comfortable life, but he could not afford racing. And then my brother came to... I was 15. He comes from France because my brother raced Alpine in Brazil. Mm-hmm. And then he was invited to go to Le Mans when Mauro Bianchi, Lucian Bianchi was racing the Alpine, the long tail. And he bring a steering wheel with leather, small, like a racing steering wheel. And I looked to the steering wheel. I said, well, I want to do for my mother's car. I used to go out on the street on the little Renault. And Renault had a huge steering wheel. And I made it. And then a friend of mine looked at the steering wheel and said, can you make one for me like this? I made by hand. I bought the aluminum, the rubber, leather. I went to a shoemaker to
stitch it?
To stitch it.
Yeah, okay.
To make a long story short. I sold the second one. And then I started manufacture of special steering wheels called Formula 1. And then I could buy the kart and motorcycle. I was racing kart and motorcycle because minimum age of 17.
Okay.
And then a year later, I bought a hydroplane boat with my brother. I raced motorcycle, karting, and a boat. Crazy, no?
Yes, and you
miss airplane. I didn't have enough money to buy airplane.
Airplanes. Therefore, we have Walter Wolf outside. And you were the mechanic for your brother.
Yes, in karting.
In karting, yeah.
And I during the week I took care of 4 karts. You don't remember, but there was another Brazilian driver that comes after me called Carlos Pache. Mm-hmm. And I was taking care of my brother's kart, Carlos Pache kart, another 2, and get some money as a mechanic, do the maintenance for the karts. And it was in the garage in my home, everything. My father bought a bench, a toolbox, and I was preparing my motorcycle to go racing. Then that was crazy about it.
Family business.
Yes.
And I think your brother was...
And then I started building karts.
Yeah.
I was the first Brazilian. I was the second factory in Brazil for building karts.
You built them?
Yes. Okay. I designed with my brother, built it. And still today, everybody drove my karts. Nelson, Ayrton. It's still now the fact. It's called Kart Mini. If you look in the history, Kart Mini. And my son, Emo, first race was Kart Mini like when he was 6. My son was coming here now. And then I was selling kart and able to race karts. And then Volkswagen launched Formula V. And then I built the first Formula V in Brazil. And I drove myself and selling. We are building Formula V to sell to clients that race against me. And then we built a Fittipaldi Porsche. It was a very fast car. I don't know if you saw the picture. If you look on the internet, it's Fittipaldi cars, Fittipaldi Porsche.
Yeah.
We broke the lap record. That's why I always like, building cars. Well, my mechanical part I like very much.
And you love to deconstruct Porsche. For example, the one of your brother that he bought new, and you did a test drive.
We are going to modify for racing, and then I did. I destroyed the car before I go to Interlagos.
You have to tell the story because it was 8 miles or what does it is?
Brand new Porsche. It was Spartano with no air condition, nothing, just for racing. To strip down and make a big wheel special engine. And it was drizzling. I asked my brother, let me try at night in São Paulo. I went to a very nice neighborhood, some corners. I slid and hit a post light just behind my head, the car.
And
a lot of history.
And your brother?
He was very happy. And then we are crazy about cars. We built, and it was very interesting. Ricardo Dívila, who was the design for Cooper-Sucker. First job with us, we built a special chassis based on the Volkswagen, and we put 2 engines with a Porsche gearbox. The 2 engines, we turned the gearbox inside, 2 engines in the middle of the car, and fiberglass body, exactly like a Volkswagen, and it was very fast. And it was an 8-cylinder Volkswagen. and we went to race in Rio de Janeiro. Was Ford GT40, Alfa Romeo P33, and I was on pole position.
With your own built car.
And then American journalist was there. His name, he wrote a book about my life called Carl Ludwigsen. He was from Ford. And he went crazy, and he took pictures of the car, Volkswagen twin engine. We opened the body. And then it was first job Ricardo Dívila did with us. And then he designed the Formula 1 cars. But we're always crazy about cars, building cars. And the car was very fast, but never finished a race. Very, very complicated.
There's one interesting thing. Your car was called Magic Marlin?
When I went to England, yes.
When you went to England, your first car. So let's start with England, just to shorten the story a little bit. Because
I went to England with a Brazilian English friend called Jerry Cunningham. He was born in Brazil, but an English family. And he was a very good friend of Frank Williams. I went to Frank Williams to buy a Titan. Formula 4 at that time was the best. And I took the books of my racing, and Frank Williams looked and said, "Is this racing Brazil?" I said, "Yeah, we're still racing Brazil."
So he was really the first guy you met in England?
Yes, it was Frank.
So, but you knew you had to go to England just to follow your
Formula 4,
plans.
to start Formula 4. Yes. It was the most economical category at that time in England. And you could have international promotion if you do well.
And to learn driving.
Yes, to learn driving. There was young people from all over the world in England. That time was very important. Ford was sponsored part of the cost. But anyway, and Frank Williams said, "I can deliver the car in 3 months." And then next day I went to Merlin, to the factory. And they have a guy order a yellow car like the Brazilian color and didn't pay the car. And then the owner of Merlin said, "Oh, there's this car here. You can take it today if you want." Because the client give the deposit but never pay the car. Okay. And the car is owned by me now. And I got the car next day when I arrived in England. And it was the Merlin.
The Magic Merlin.
Because then I won some races, and then Jody Scheckter.
He bought it after you?
No, after me
you,
was Vanderbilt.
Okay.
Family, what's his name? And then he sold it to Jody.
And he won races with the old car as well?
For 2 years, that car keep winning races, and they call Magic Merlin.
And Jody still have the car?
He still have?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know if he has the car. I don't know if Jody has.
I'm not sure.
I don't think so. I don't know who is this guy. Someone in Holland had a car like a few years ago, and Les Jody bought from Holland, the Marshke Merning.
So, and Frank Williams always had an eye on you and your career, yes. And he followed your steps.
It was beginning of 69. And then mid-year, Jim Russell invited me to drive Formula 3. And then I joined Formula 3 with Jim Russell. And he said, I want to introduce your mechanic. He don't have any experience in racing, but he's a good guy. He's my son, my brother-in-law. And was Ralph Furman, who started Van Diemen. His first job was with me in Formula 3.
So you started in the Lotus 59?
Lotus 59.
Okay. It was the year 69.
It was 1969.
1969, yeah. So, and you were, I think your first race was third position? Or?
Third or fourth, yes.
So
and then the end of the year, Frank Williams called me to drive Formula 1.
After the first year of Formula 3?
Yes.
So, okay.
Formula 3, and Colin Chapman called me. And then I went to see Colin Chapman. I went to his office, sit down at the table, my leg was shaking. Yeah. I said, in front of Colin Chapman, it was...
Sure.
God gave me so many gifts in my life, because this was... Arrived in Brazil in February. I was arriving in England from Brazil. And then in October, 2 teams called me to drive Formula 1, And it was difficult. I told Colin, thanks for the invitation, but I don't have enough experience to drive Formula 1.
You refused? You didn't even test it?
I knew if I would jump in Formula 1 without Formula 2, I could burn my career, and I want to do Formula 2. I told Colin, if you wait me, I do 6 months of Formula 2. And then the British Grand Prix 1970, I can start. Mm-hmm. And that's how, and Colin, I was waiting the answer. And he said, okay, we do the deal. I said, okay, good. But he could say, this Brazilian guy goes away now. But he was very good to me, Colin, yes.
So you kept in touch with him, and the second call of him?
I was driving Formula 2 Lotus, and then when I met Jochen, because Jochen was the king of Formula 2, Jochen Reed, and he was Lotus. And then always on the paddock, always together, Jochen. Jochen was very good to me, always giving advice, helped me.
Did you have some kind of a role model during that time?
Yes,
the Euros?
When I left Brazil, to me, Jim Clark was very big name in the race at that time. Jack Stewart. In 1968, I won the prize, the best Brazilian driver. They give like a gold helmet, and they invite Jack Stewart to come. And I was, Jack Stewart, to me. I have pictures, he gave me the gold. I never saw that. 2 years later, I was race against him, it was fantastic. And Jochen was very good to me, always.
As a teammate, was he hard to beat? I think
my first test, people don't know, my first test in Silverstone, Formula 1, was the Lotus 49, the old car.
And he had the newer one.
He had the 72. And then Colin Chapman asked Jochen, can you do a few laps to see if the car is good for Emerson? He did a few laps, and he said, the car is good, and we race against each other in Formula 2. He knew me well. He always gave me advice. And then I did like 10 laps, stopped. The car was understeering. And Jochen came on the cockpit with Colin to see what I was talking about the car. And then Colin said, I'm going to put more front wing. Jochen said, no, Emerson, just mid-corner, use more power. You make the back end to brake. And I did, and I went much faster. And Jochen was so excited, he got the signboard in Silverstone. He was giving sign to me. I said, first time I drive Formula 1, Jochen Rindt is giving the signboard, For me, it was like a dream. And Jochen is very good to me, yes.
Yeah.
He was very happy that I was going fast. And I see he was not, they were changing his car. He took away from the mechanic and started giving the board to me. I should have a picture. Can you imagine? Jochen giving the, thanks God, it's always very special.
So 1970, you started Formula 1.
And then I had the tragedy in Monza, was a disaster. to me was the first time I realized how tough it was, you know. I had breakfast with Jochen because Jochen didn't want to continue Formula 2. He had a team with Roy Winkelman, with Bernie, and Roy Winkelman was English. And Jochen said, I'm not next year drive Formula 2 and Formula 1. Do you want to replace? I said, for sure, Jochen, I'll be. And I shake hands with him. And then a few hours later, he got killed. It was the first time myself and my family, we realized how tough was Formula 1.
Did you ever, I think the suspension broke, or you don't really know what happened, I think.
The drive shaft.
Yeah.
And the car, I think, breaking 3 wheels.
One thing, so, yeah.
And then, because he was braking to parabolic, and immediately the car turns into the guardrail. So Jochen was not using the belts here.
Ah, okay.
And he slid the body and broke the leg into the safety belt.
So Colin Chapman was known for cars maybe a little bit over the limit, and you had technical background as well. Did you question the cars, or did you?
Yeah.
Did you look?
For sure.
Yeah.
They modified the drive shafts after that, and then always Colin. People don't realize, but Colin was very concerned about the safety of the car more than people think. He was always because he was an aeronautic engineer. And then he always make with the minimum weight, very light. But he, in the end of 72, when I won my first world championship, he comes to me and says, "Hi, Emerson, I don't want to, I'm very close to you. I'm afraid to miss you." When he told me that, I said, my God, you know, it was reality. Because there were so many crashes, you know. I had one very bad mechanical failure, broke the front wheel in Zandvoort, but was a wheel made a supplier of Colin, was not made by Colin, but broke the wheel. I was the worst Formula 1 crash I had in my life. And I was stuck in the car for half an hour because all the front of the car bent and I couldn't get out. I was sitting fuel, and then Graham Hughes stopped, and Joe Ramirez was a very famous mechanic, saw from the pit. He was working Jack Stewart. He put his toolbox, run, and they cut the pedals, then I couldn't get out. Graham Hughes, Joe Ramirez. This was my worst crash of lots. But was
thanks God,
I broke the ligaments of my right foot, and then for a year my foot was injured. I had to drive with injection, do a therapy, but it was good. It was the only time I got injured in Formula 1.
Okay. Your first world championship. By the way, you're the first Formula 1 world champion on my podcast. Thanks for it.
Good. You have many world champions to interview.
Yes. Your father was commenting your race.
Yes, it was very emotional for him.
I think it was for the whole family very emotional. Have you seen it? What
yes, his voices, he went crazy. Normally he was very neutral because he could not make it bigger, you know, another Brazilian driver doing well, he had to say the same thing as for me. But this day he lost the control emotionally.
I think so.
And it was interesting. I went back to Switzerland next morning. To me, it was a dream to be world champion. First was a dream to drive a Formula 1 car, to start the Grand Prix. And then when I won the championship, I went home in Switzerland. I had lunch with my father and my brother, and I told them I'm retired from racing, 1972.
After the first
World Championship. My father said, why? I said, you know, the risk. I left Brazil, I want to be a Grand Prix driver, not only Grand Prix driver, now I want the World Championship. What else I want in life, you know? I stop now. And then my father gave the best advice. He knew how much I like it. He said, you can stop now, but I promise in 1 or 2 years, you'll be back in the cockpit and it'll be much more difficult for you. because you're never going to stay out of racing. And he was right. And then I continued. But it was a good advice. I was going to stop.
Yeah.
I decided the same night I said, I'm retiring. And I had no idea I was going to race. No, Formula 1, Indianapolis, so many years.
How does life change when you're Formula 1 world champion? During that time in Brazil, you could have been the president.
It was new for Brazil motor race, and then everybody went crazy, all the media. When I drove into Lausanne, I live in Switzerland, Lausanne. And when realized it was 6 o'clock in the morning, because we had a big party in Milano with all the Brazilians, with the press, and calling everybody. And when I drove into Lausanne, it was 6 o'clock in the morning, the newspaper grandstand, newspaper? In French was Fittipaldi, champion du monde. I speak French, I realized, that's me. It was the first time, I remember today, I stopped the car and I look in the grandstand, the title, the sports section, Fittipaldi, champion du monde. I said, that's me. That's when I said, I retired. What else I want?
After that, did you think about going to Ferrari maybe, or did you have the
I always
opinion?
dreamed to go to Ferrari.
Okay.
Actually, first time in 1971, Enzo Ferrari invited me to go to Maranello. I had lunch with him. And first thing he told me, first time I met Enzo, commendatore Ferrari, Fittipaldi, come stai Chicolandi? Chicolandi, we say Chicolandi. In Italian, they say Chicolandi. Was the guy who won his first race. My friend of my father.
Yeah.
And my father was there with Ferrari. Yeah. And then I went back to Brazil. I called Chicolandi. He was older than my father.
Okay.
And I used to call him Mr. Landi, not Chicolandi, because he was much older. I said, Mr. Landi, first time I met Ferrari, he asked, how you doing? He started crying.
Yeah, I think so.
This is fantastic for the sport.
So it's fantastic for Enzo that he never forgets.
No, he never forgot.
I know.
First time I met him, come stai Fittipaldi? He didn't call me Emerson. He said, Fittipaldi, come stai Chicolandi? It's history. But then he asked me to drive Formula 1 and sports car in the Ferrari. And I said, no, I'm focusing Formula 1. And he said, I pay you double than Colin Chapman. But you have to drive both. I said, thank you for the offer. I have a dream to drive for you.
How much was it during that time? Can I ask it?
I was making like 200,000 pounds, was 400,000 pounds. That time was a lot of money.
It's still a lot,
And then when Nicky had a crash in Nürburgring, Nicky was at the hospital. Ferrari called me to replace Nicky. And I said, now is not time to talk, thank you. I always had the dream to drive for Ferrari, but it never happened the right time. Ayrton had the same, and Nelson. All the three of us never able to. It never happened, the three of us, to drive Ferrari. But that's life, no?
That's life. So why did you go away from Lotus? In the next year when you...
In Monza, I still have a chance to win the World Championship, points against Jackie. And then before the race, I talked to Colin and Ronnie. And if you're leading the race, we're not going to race against each other.
So Ronnie Peterson, your teammate.
And then we say 15 laps to go. They're going to give a sign and we change position. There was no radio at that time. And then 15 laps to go. Ronnie was winning. I was right on Ronnie's gearbox, not pressing to pass. It don't come the sign. Next lap, don't come the sign. Third lap, don't come the sign. Now I said, now I'm going to attack Ronnie. And Ronnie knew. And Ronnie was my best friend in racing. Always, since Formula 3 to Formula 1. And then we started racing against each other. And racing, you can be the best friend, you can be a brother. When you're on the racetrack, you want to win the race. And then he won the race, I was second, and I went to Colin and said, Colin, I still have a chance to win the World Championship, so I'm 2 races to go. And then Colin, didn't say anything. And then on back, I live in Switzerland. On back, I say I'm leaving Lotus. And Philip Morris, Marlboro, asked me to choose a team for Marlboro. And then I went to England. It was my responsibility. And I talked to Bernie Brabant, Ken Tiro, because Jackie already was going to retire. This was for 74. This was in October, after the season's finished. Yeah. They asked me to do this. And then there was McLaren. I like McLaren, very young people.
Bruce McLaren, the hero.
But
wasn't he? Yeah.
Bruce was already killed.
And you never met him? I know, yeah. In 1970 he was killed, I think, in Goodwood.
Before
you started.
Before Brands Hatch.
Yeah.
The Cannon car opened the body and he hit a concrete post, Marshall post. And then I went to McLaren. I liked Teddy Mayer, who was a very good friend of Bruce and took over. He was an American lawyer. And people don't know, but his brother, Tim Mayer, was a very good friend of Bruce, American. And he got killed in Tasman Series. And then Teddy said, we make a Formula One team. And he was from Pennsylvania, Teddy Mayer, American lawyer, very good guy, very good administrator. And I liked the team. And I went back to Switzerland. I told the people from Auburn, I said, McLaren. And then it's history of McLaren. They have, most of the guys are from New Zealand, very young mechanics, very enthusiastic mechanics. And people sometimes ask, why the Brazilian drivers come here? I had, my philosophy. If someone leaves a different continent, like in New Zealand, even they speak English, they go to England, it's a completely different country from New Zealand. Brazil, we leave, Brazil comes to Europe, all the countries are different. And then you are more committed to succeed, because that's what you have to do in life. You have no option. Or you succeed or don't succeed. Because if you are from Europe, and it's a different effort, different mindset. You understand mindset?
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's why a lot of people that come from different continents are more committed to succeed than the people who lives here. You have your family, if you don't succeed, okay, I do something else. I have my family, I'm born in Hamburg, I'm born, in Munich, in Milano. If I don't succeed, I still have my family in Milan, I can do other things. But when you leave a continent, and I like the people from McLaren, they're very, very enthusiastic people. I like the M23, was a good car. And then I told Colin I was not going to continue. He wanted me to continue. He called my wife. I said, I tell Emerson, you cannot leave.
Every trick.
Yes. I always liked Colin, After we still very good relationship. Even when I would join McLaren, he was so good to me. He was a mentor to me. I always have a lot of gratitude for Colin. I'm still very good friend of the family, Clive Chapman, everybody. And Colin was a genius. 1977, I was testing Copersucar in Paul Ricard, and it was already dark after the day. It was winter test. And knocked the door, Colin Chapman. Emerson, come here, I want to show a car I invented. It was the ground effect, first ground effect. He was so proud to show to me.
Okay.
And then he said, look under the car, the side is a wing, upside down. He was a genius.
So, did you drive the car? No.
No, I had my... Then I had to make my Copersucar under, modify it.
So you started your work again. Yeah, I know.
Now I have to make like that. Everybody copied.
Another example for his genius, or more or less genius, I think in 1971 he built a turbine car with a, and you drove it. Or you tested
it? One. No, I raced in Monza. Only time in Grand Prix race.
Yeah.
If you look on the internet, the pictures, It's the only time a turbine car was a Pratt & Whitney from helicopter. Was 650 horsepower, very fast, but was dangerous car.
Yeah, and I think it's completely different to...
I drove last year in Goodwood again. The car.
Really?
I never drove since 71, and then Clive Chapman rebuilt the car. I drove again in Goodwood. It's a fantastic car.
But
it was from Indianapolis.
It's really difficult to accelerate because it's so difficult to guess when the power comes in.
4-wheel drive.
Yeah, 4-wheel drive, yes. Yeah.
And when you start the engine, just running in the engine, the car goes 80 miles per hour. You have to hold on the brake and it goes crazy car.
Like a monster.
Yes. If you have no brakes, you never stop. But the engine is always
turning, yeah. No.
Because there's no reverse. Like in plane, you have reverse. But on the car, you have no reverse.
Just power.
It's a crazy car. It was another experience from Colin. But, Colin was a genius. From all the teams I drove, he was the most creative. Always new ideas, new things. Colin would put their head in here, stay quiet, and he comes with a solution. Always improve.
Have you ever met at McLaren Eddie Wiss? Do you know him? He was a mechanic for the Can-Am cars, so maybe.
No, I'm what's her name?
Eddie Wiss. It comes from Switzerland. He's now really famous in the historic Ferrari scene.
And there was another guy who went all the way from McLaren, from Ron Dennis, even now. I'm trying to remember his name. But anyway, Teddy Mayer was the owner of McLaren when I joined. And then in 90, when I joined Penske in Indy, he was my engineer.
Okay.
Can you imagine how he's raced?
A long time.
We won my second win in Indianapolis was Teddy Mayer, engineer.
Okay.
He was talking to me on the radio. and he sold the McLaren to Ron Dennis.
Yeah.
In 1979, I think 78.
In 1974, McLaren allowed you to race another car on the Nürburgring. We have to talk about the Nürburgring as well. You once said in your book that it's your most favorite track, but you were allowed to drive a Porsche 917.
Yes, it's a fantastic car.
Yeah.
Incredible experience.
On the Nürburgring.
It was Willi Kauhsen car.
Willi Kauhsen, I'm laughing because he's one of our heroes in my podcast.
Really?
He's
Willi Kauhsen took me to Nürburgring, and then he drove his Mercedes around before I drove the Can-Am car.
Yeah.
And he said, Emerson, this corner flat with the 917. Are you sure? I said, don't worry, come flat. Because the car had so much downforce, a big wing.
Yeah, 917.
And it was a fantastic car.
10, yeah.
And he was right, but race morning was raining. I opened the window, say raining.
Typical Nürburgring
1,200 horsepower on the wet. I cannot touch the throttle. And I'm warming up in the short circuits, around the paddock, the little one. And the engine started misfiring. It was not going 12 cylinder. And I stopped, everybody from Porsche. Willi was just watching, the engineers, the mechanics from Porsche. Emerson, it's misfired engine. I said, leave it like this. 10 cylinders enough, don't put 12. The Germans didn't understand my joke. They said, this guy must be crazy. I said, don't touch your car.
But you still had wheel spin in every gear, I think.
With 10 cylinders. I think even 8 cylinders in the wheel. Give you half the power, 600 horsepower. It'll be enough. I had 1,200. It's crazy. I said, don't. They looked to me and said, don't touch, leave him misfired engine.
And I think you finished sixth. Third.
There was 2 Lolas with Formula 1 engine.
Okay.
The Porsche couldn't touch. They put the 12 cylinders.
Okay. So, as I said even before, your favorite track is the Nürburgring.
Yes.
How did you learn it? So I think it's so difficult with all these corners.
Colin Chapman give you a low to 7. That's very low. Mm-hmm. You sit like a Formula car to have the right view. I stay from Monday to Friday, driving every day that you pay to go around. And I stayed the whole 5 days there. And then my first race, Formula 2. Jochen qualified pole position, Jochen. I think Derek Bell with Brabham second, I was third. Qualified third, first time, it was good. Lotus. And then Jochen come to me, Jochen Rindt come to me and say, Emerson, if you do good start, get inside my gearbox and just follow me, what I'm going to do. Because he knew it was my first time in Nürburgring. And I did a good start. First lap, I was so excited. I'm behind Jochen, Nürburgring, second place, fantastic, And we went by the first lap, and then Jochen really started driving fast. I don't know, 2-3 kilometers, he went away. I lost my reference, but I finished third. Derek Bell passed me, I finished third. And then we go to the podium. I look to Jochen and say, Jochen, you joke with me on the first lap. You disappear. Only meet now on the podium. Where you are. I'd never see you again. He just gone. He won by, 20 seconds. He gone. It was my first experience in Nürburgring. Yeah. I was there at the podium with Jochen. Jochen was laughing to me.
So, okay, is there any other favorite racetracks?
Interlagos. After Nürburgring, for sure, Interlagos. 8 kilometers, all types of corners, the old Interlagos. Turn 1, 2 was like Indianapolis, very fast. 3, banking, like Avos, remember? We had banking, and then we had corners uphill, downhill, long corners, short. It was 8 kilometers, Interlagos, a long track. It was the longest after Nürburgring.
You never did Spa-Francorchamps in a Grand Prix car?
Because it was...
the favorite track of most of the drivers.
Was when too dangerous, they stop, and then I raced in Zolder, Nivelles and Zolder, but never Spa. I drove last year with the Copper-Sucker. It was a fantastic track, fun to drive. I was racing Formula 4 there. He's going to race this year again, Formula 3. Okay. It's a beautiful track, Spa. But still Interlagos much better. Much.
Okay.
Interlagos was the closest to Nürburgring in the world. All the tracks I drove until now, I still go all over the world. Nürburgring number 1 and the Interlagos number 2.
Okay. If you're close to the ring, do you do some rounds
I want to
in
take
a private car?
Never. We always watch on YouTube the people driving.
Have you seen Timo Bernhard in the record lap with the Porsche 919?
Yes.
It's like time lapse,
It's a fantastic track.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Your teammate at McLaren was Jochen Maas.
Jochen, yes.
So how was it? Did
he
you?
was a very good driver, very good Jochen, always.
Yeah, I think it's
good teammate, good people, very good relationship.
His only first place he had in a McLaren.
Yeah.
75. And then you stopped racing for other team bosses, and then you were your own boss.
With my brother, yes.
Yeah, with your brother. And you bought the car.
My brother first raced 1 year, and then I decided to leave McLaren and go to the Brazilian team that was going to be, I was already twice world champion. I said, I love building cars. I said, this is a chance to build a Brazilian team. We are doing really well. And then the last year was the best when we bought Wolf Racing from Walter. And we had, at that time, I had Richard Divila, engineer. And then I had Harvey Postwaite, who was a very good engineer. And Adrian Newey.
Adrian Newey.
First
Isn't
job.
it crazy? Yes, his first job. Did you know his talent?
We looked for the best aerodynamist from school in London, from university. And then we found Adrian. I'm still a very good friend of Adrian. He was another genius. And then we built a new car. It was first car that Adrian helped to design. Adrian was a junior engineer. The chief engineer was Harvey, Richard Divila, and then Adrian. And it was a very good car. First time we took to Hockenheim. Keke was my teammate. He qualified 4th, and I think I qualified 6th. The car never run. We had no budget for testing, and it was sponsored by Skoll. And then the marketing director of Skoll called me and said, Emerson, we decided not to continue in Formula One because the Brazilian press was destroying the team. And they invest so much money, millions of dollars. Mm. And they said, that don't justify. And then the professional journalists in Brazil for racing, they respect us. They knew how tough it is to build a Formula One team. It takes years to build up a good team. But the normal media who didn't understand, they made jokes of sugar car. It was a disaster for us. And then in 1980 was my last year. And at the end of the year, I decided to retire. But I always want to go to Indianapolis. When Jim Clark won Indianapolis in 1965 with Colin Chapman, I was still in Brazil. And when I joined Colin Chapman, Lotus, I keep asking how was to race Indianapolis. Colin loved to race Indianapolis. He said, Emerson, Indianapolis is good. You stay 3 weeks, and then comes the race days, big event, only 4 corners to get the maximum out of the car, maximum out of the driver. Mm-hmm. It's difficult, it's a challenge. And then I had the opportunity to go. And I tested in 1974 the McLaren that won Indianapolis from Johnny Rutherford. Okay. After winning the World Championship, I flew to Indianapolis in October, and I did 2 days testing. The car was perfect, but there was no carbon fiber. And when they had the crash in Indianapolis, the speed was already 380, 390. It was really crazy.
The walls were very solid.
Was there, not forgiven. Yeah. And if you hit that speed, it disintegrated the car. Yeah. And then I was exactly 10 years later, in 1984, but it was already carbon fiber. And then I said, now I go to Indianapolis. It was a new challenge for me.
How was it in comparison to Formula One cars?
At that time, the cars were very similar. They are a little longer wheelbase, but if you look on the mid-80s, Formula One car, IndyCar, they're very similar.
Yeah, and you never drove these complete downforce cars, I think, during your career. They came later.
In 98, I had. The last year, I had the full downforce car, Formula One.
In Formula One, okay.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. The Copersucar Fittipaldi was a Skoll car.
Yeah, okay.
Was sponsored by Skoll. Was a full ground effect, yes. Mm-hmm. I didn't like it. Because you had to go... It's difficult to explain, but when you have a lot of downforce, every kilometer that you are faster, you multiply the weight on the car. Yeah. And that means on a fast corner, if you dive into the corner much faster, you hope the car is going to last, not going to lose, because you generate much more downforce. But to find the limit, sometimes you just lost and went like catapult to the side. It was big crash. And it was a little bit out of control of the judgment of the driver. And that's when I say I stop. I don't want to continue because of the ground effect. And then in Indy they didn't have the skirts. They have the wing under, but no, it was not the full ground effect. It was more forgiving, the car easy to drive, but very fast.
It looks amazing. If you see the cars of your career, they look like a modern dragster with these huge, massive rear wheels. It's unbelievable.
The wheels, the wing is still big. Yes.
It's so amazing talking to you because you embodies for me the 70s, the golden era, what I call the golden era of motor racing, in my opinion. So the cars, the style, music, everything was amazing during that time.
It was the hippie time.
It was, yeah.
In the world. Everything changed.
Really in the middle of it.
The fashion, the cars, the people, the mind. Yeah. It was a new era for not just for the cars, everything.
And I think it was more easygoing also from the point of view of you as a driver. You know, today you always have briefing, debriefing, fitness. So that's the circle of life of a race car driver nowadays. Would you like to switch?
I always like the future, modern. I think that time the ambience was more relaxed, even with the dangerous. Today they have to change the system of Formula One. The system, the weekend of Formula One, you don't have time to enjoy outside of the car because you're full-time committed. The drivers have very little time. It's not because they are different, it's because the circumstances are different. Like in America, IndyCar, they are much more organized weekend. You have time
it's more a show.
You have time to your family, you have time, and everything is better organized. Formula One is too nervous, everybody's, But I like the new Formula One cars. I think it's getting better last year, not much equal race. The new Formula One now are better to race against each other. They need the future. I think the new rules are going to make the car smaller, a little less downforce, to be able to even run close to each other. But I like modern. I like the new technology. I always like to see. But it's very complex, a Formula One car now. All what I call the analytics, the telemetry, the analytics on board is fantastic. I'm going with McLaren to a lot of Grand Prix. As the races happen, 2 drivers driving, they had about 50 engineers in England, live to in the paddock, it's another crazy. 20 guys, engineers at the track, getting all this analytics. It's crazy.
It's a massive amount of data.
And then they have to communicate to the driver, and the driver's steering wheel is crazy.
And they have to see what the others do, as well.
All the strategic.
It's crazy. But it's
modern,
Yeah, but it's complicated for the spectators to follow it.
It's complicated for the drivers.
For everybody.
I always stay with the engineers of McLaren. They call him to stay with the radio for him to learn, and listen to the driver and the engineers. It's complicated. It's amazing. But I like the future. Future's past is history. You don't change it. The future, mystery. And the future is exciting,
Did you ever have the chance to drive a modern Formula One car?
I drove Kimi's Lotus in Paul Ricard like 7 years ago.
Oh, okay.
But I sit down in the car. I did like 15 laps in Paul Ricard. It was fun. And then I sit down, and the engineer started explaining to me, you can do this, you can do that. Look, these are the adjustments for the diff, this adjustment, all the steering wheel. I wait, half an hour he talked to me. And I look to him and say, put the best adjustment you think is going to be the best. I'm not going to touch anything. I'm going to have fun to drive the car.
Then he said, for the first part of the track, it's this, and then you have to turn some buttons and take the next corner.
Forget when you told that. I want to have fun. I'm not touching anything. I want to have a feeling for the car. My first corner after the pit at 90 degrees, the brakes are so efficient, so much downforce, I stop. Look in the corner, my brake is stop. I stop. They look to me and say, this guy stop.
The corner is 100 meters away, you can accelerate.
I stop. And then I was getting the speed, but I need at least 2 days.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, to go close to the limit of the car and myself. But it was a fantastic experience. So much downforce, so much easy to drive the car. Very well balanced. Mid corners, slow corners, fast corners. The car is exactly the same. The only thing I didn't like that time, they had the 13-inch wheel and the tires, a lot of sidewall. And when on the fast corner, when I turned, it took like a fraction of a second for the car to turn, and then the car moves, the wheel moves on the tire.
Okay.
And then finally they changed after so many years. Now it's bigger wheels. Because in America I always had much bigger wheels, smaller tires. I mean, then you had a quick reaction, like a low profile on the street. The low profile is like karting. Now, I didn't like that in Formula One because the wheel was moving inside the carcass.
Okay.
When I turned.
I'm not sure if I would have realized it, but...
No, but it's a fun car.
The most direct car.
So much downforce, fun. It was a good experience.
Who was the hardest competitor on the track? Was it Clay Ragazzoni? Who was really difficult to race against?
You know, I had so lucky to race against so many great champions. But some guys, you didn't have the confidence to race side, wheel to wheel. Clay was tough. We had some tough drivers that could put you on a difficult position. But was, like all the great champions that I raced, different generation, they're always good, Mario was very good. Jackie was a fantastic driver because he was just a generation before mine, but he was a fantastic driver. Nicky, the experience, and then I raced with the son of Gilles Villeneuve, Jacques Villeneuve. I raced with Michael Andretti, the young generation too was fun.
Yeah.
And thanks God I'm here.
Yes, thank
and God always been good to me all my life and still good to me today. I'm happy to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I'm really proud, yeah.
And that's part of my life. Now enjoying my son racing. It's new challenge. And you always have to have a new challenge in life. And now the new challenge to get Emo's opportunity to see if he has the dream to be a Formula One driver, to ride a Formula One.
You had a complete different challenge in 1980, I think it was, and you did a little sidestep to a rally car. So I have to ask, from a German point of view, Walter Röhrl,
yes,
and you switched cars. He squeezed himself into your Formula One car with the helmet over the air intake.
And then he took me on the proving grounds in Birmingham.
Yeah.
Incredible drive. I never drove really. I was a passenger. He said, yes, that's enough. He put the car sideways. Fantastic driver. Fantastic car control. Yeah. I always say the rally drivers are very improvising. They have to improvise because change the condition. Every lap is different. Every time they go to the track, it would be raining. Change the mud, the rock. They are very good in quick reflex to control.
And you have to trust your co-pilot. Difficult thing.
I'll never be a co-pilot. Navigator, never. I was just watching, his car control was unbelievable. And he braked before the corner, put the car sideways, and I was looking the front through the side window, not to the windscreen. And then he got right into the corner. Yeah. Oh, they have incredible cars.
And think about the Group B rally cars in the mid-80s. They accelerated like a Formula One car.
Yes.
The last question. If the world runs out of fuel and everybody gets his last 50 liters or how much gallons it might be, in which car and on what track would you burn them? If the last fuel in your life.
A new Formula One car in Interlagos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Das war Emerson Fittipaldi. Ich hoffe, das Interview hat euch gefallen. Falls ihr Lust habt, einmal einige Motorsportlegenden live zu erleben, dann würde ich mich freuen, euch am 13. Mai in München zu begrüßen. Da bin ich nämlich im Zenit und da erlebt ihr die Alte Schule live. Und meine Gäste an dem Abend sind Jost Capito, Harald Groß und Walter Brun. Und ich bin mir sicher, dass ihr diese Zusammenstellung so schnell nicht mehr erleben werdet. Tickets für den Abend gibt es bei Eventim unter eventim.de und den Link, den habe ich euch auch nochmal in die Shownotes geschrieben. Wir hören uns in der nächsten Woche wieder. Bis dahin eine schöne Zeit.
Infos, Bilder und alles Wissenswerte unter der Internetadresse www.alte-schule-podcast.de